2019. May I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any comments from the public tonight? All right, no comments. Moving on to presentations and discussions of interest to the committee. We have our town budget presentation with Town Administrator Libby Gibson and Town of Nantucket Municipal Finance Director Brian Turbot. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think we might want to go sit down in the audience.
Okay.
Trying to find a pen.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you guys having us here tonight. We're going to give you pretty much the same presentation that we gave to the Select Board last Wednesday. We'll try to abbreviate a little bit. It only took about 2.5 hours to get through last week. Kidding. We'll try to get through it much quicker than that. So this slide, but right before we get into the slides, section 4.2D3 of the town charter requires the town manager to prepare and submit to the select board an annual operating budget. So that is what we did last Wednesday. There are 3 documents that were provided to the board in their packet: a PowerPoint that summarizes the budget projections, which we're going to try to quickly take you through, a draft budget message. The budget message explains our recommendations, our projections, and various issues in a lot more narrative detail. And we have a spreadsheet with the list of town requested expense increases. We wanted to really just take you through the PowerPoint tonight. And again, it's an overview of updated projections, recommendations, next steps, and the detail is really contained within the budget message. We would like to take you through that quickly, not in a lot of detail, at the end of the PowerPoint. Our fiscal 21 budget process begins with the review of preliminary projected expenses and revenues. We did that with the select board on September 18th. We issued budget instructions to the departments on September 26th, and we reviewed every departmental budget between mid-October and mid-November, including the school. We met with the superintendent and with Martin 2 or 3 times, maybe even more. Is this slide 2?
That's the first one. I'll go to the next one.
Just slide 2.
That's slide 2.
Okay. Our budget objectives for 21 are to keep the operating budget within projected revenue. We do, however, have a recommendation that would free up general funds for specific purposes, address any legal mandates. We're trying to address priorities that are in the select board strategic plan. And we are working hard to maintain some flexibility with the levy limit and the use of free cash in the budget. In other words, we're trying not to spend every penny of our revenue. Slide 3. These are a list of initiatives that are specific to the strategic plan and the staffing study that we did about a year ago. And these are the items that we are recommending in our fiscal 2021 budget recommendation. There are a number of actions we take always on an ongoing basis to reduce expenses and increase efficiency and transparency. I'm sure the school has a number of these things that are similar. We also sought and received a couple of grants during 2020, one from Remain for a sustainability plan, which is in process now, and the other was what's called the Compact Community Grant, which is a grant program through the state for towns to take on specific projects. They give you a little money, and then your project might help other towns, and it goes on to the state website. We did one of those for collective bargaining best management practices and updated personnel policies, and that report will be out. It's out in draft form now, and we hope that it will be presented to the board in January. Brian's going to take us through the next several slides.
Excuse me. Thank you. Good evening. So for fiscal 21, we're projecting revenue of $106,596,000, which is net of about $250,000 in what we'll put into overlay for property tax abatements. We're projecting expenses of $106,242,000, which would currently leave unused levy capacity of $353,491. This slide here summarizes the revenue between property taxes, local estimated receipts. The 2 largest local estimated receipts are motor vehicle excise and rooms and meals tax. Property tax is estimated to be able to raise in the real and personal property tax $89.2 million. That shows the balanced budget of 106,242. So if everything stayed the way it was, we would just not, that unused levy capacity would not be raised in the real and personal property taxes to the residents of the island. Expenditures totaling the same 106,242, 705. On the right, you'll see the percentage changes. This year, we gave the school $1.7 million in discussions with the superintendent and the chief financial officer. This slide just breaks down the pie chart for all the revenue sources. As typical here in most communities in the Commonwealth, tax revenue is the primary driver or the largest source of revenue for the communities. This pie chart breaks down the expenditures on the two slides before into just where they're breaking out. Special appropriations is essentially the transfer to the enterprise funds and some of the raise and appropriates for other things, which we'll see in a future slide here. General fund expense category recommendations. Town operational expenses of $7.7 million, EIRs of $842,000, town salaries of $21,616,000, with new personnel of $164,387. School operational expenses of $5,577,000, EIRs of $360,000, and school salaries of $26,219,000. This is the numbers that the breakout that the school gave us for the presentation. So that is where that came from. Fixed cost, we're projecting active health insurance to be $10,281,000, which is an 8.75% increase. We're projecting retiree health insurance to be $3,333,000, which is also an 8.75% increase. We worked really hard with our health insurance consultant through right up until basically before the presentation to get that number as close to as close to 7.5%, which is medical rate inflation right now, as we possibly could. And right now, he's comfortable recommending an 8.75% increase. General insurance is projected to be $2,619,000, which is a 10% increase. I will say that it's a little bit unknown because of the large amount of catastrophic losses that many of the insurance companies have faced due to storms in the Bahamas and other events over this last year. So we're hoping that it'll be 10%, but we're not entirely sure given the fact that we're an island and they may rate us a little bit different with that exposure after the events of the past 6 or 9 months. Debt service, $9.8 million, which is just per the established schedule from the amortization tables. Retirement is $5.2 million, which is an 8.5% increase, which is consistent with the funding schedule that Barnstable County has created to fully fund the unfunded portion of the retirement by 2035. Enterprise fund subsidies are $9.44 million, which is an 11.5% increase. This is one area that has substantially increased over fiscal 20. The Island Home has increased by $826,000 over last year's subsidy to just about $3.1 million. So this is one of the areas that we're concerned with, and as the town manager had indicated, we have made a recommendation as part of this that we do an operating override to fund our Island Home with the operating override so that it's funded correctly and in a sustainable way that allows us all to continue to move forward with initiatives and programs that may be necessary to operate. Special appropriations, which are voted throughout the budget, the Health and Human Services, we've proposed no change to the $450,000, which is consistent with last year. County assessment does not need to go up from the $170,201. I do think that this is the last year that we'll be able to keep it there based on the 2.5% growth in the way the county is funded. Reserve fund, we're recommending $500,000. Unpaid bills was about $8,000 last year. We're recommending the $20,000 at this point, but we do believe that may change between now and town meeting. Other post-employment benefits, which we have been contributing to on an annual basis since 2014, we're recommending $500,000. We're projecting no overlay or any other deficits that we would have to raise on the recap at this point. Cherry sheet charges of $1,002,462, which is an 80% increase, which is primarily driven by the switch from seasonal service with the NRTA to the year-round service. The year-round service is increasing the cherry sheet charges from approximately $555,000, to over $1 million, which is about a $436,000 increase in year-round, the cost of year-round service alone. So when the town manager and I sat down to do this budget, we immediately, with two items, had $1.2 million of the levy capacity consumed by two items, which is one of the reasons why we have proposed the override to the board for our island home. Minimum capital funding requirement is $1,033,000, which is just 1% of prior year real and personal property tax collections, as well as local estimated receipts. All told, expenses totaling $106,242,704. That's the expense increase. I think so, yeah. Okay. Okay. So on the town side, much like the school, I'm sure, goes through, we had $3,732,594 of submitted expense increase requests. The town manager, through discussions and a review of the budget, has recommended $1,072,000 be funded for the town. That would be made up of one time of $842,000, which would come from free cash, and ongoing through the tax levy and other general revenues of $230,387.
So our expense increase requests have had to be reduced substantially. We have developed criteria over the years to evaluate the requests that are submitted by the departments, and that criteria includes whether or not the items are legally mandated. A higher prioritization is given for requests that support the board's strategic plan and or may be recommended in our staffing study, whether or not the item improves departmental operations or efficiency, whether it's necessary to support new programming or existing programming, or whether or not it provides continuity of operations. All of our EIRs, each one is ranked based on a point system. The recommended EIRs are shown in this slide. The green really is just trying to represent how it connects with the strategic plan or the staffing study. Overall, our recommendations include 2 new full-time year-round positions and 3 new seasonal positions. Funding for strategic planning initiatives and facilitation, vehicle and equipment replacements, and some operational increases related to safety, IT improvements, and various contractual increases. The requested EIRs are also in I don't know if you all have received our packet electronically, but we have a separate spreadsheet that has all of the requested EIRs in it, and these are, again, just the ones that are being recommended.
So as noted previously, the tax levy and other general revenues will support $230,387 of those expense increase requests. Free cash, consistent with the town's financial policies, is $842,000 and being used exclusively for one-time events or one-time expense increase requests. The preliminary free cash recommendations that we made to the Board of Selectmen, as most of you may be aware, general fund certified free cash was $10,334,000. We have funded $842,000 of one-time town expense increase requests. The school had an expense increase request of $160,000, which we have funded through the use of free cash. We're recommending $6 million be allocated to town and school capital requests, along with the $1,033,000 that we're raising in the budget. We're recommending putting $500,000 into the stabilization account. We haven't put any money in since I've been here in that, so we're recommending a $500,000 transfer into that. We're recommending $750,000 to the capital stabilization fund. 3 years ago, we funded it with $1.25 million, and in order to get to the policy level of 3%, this would be a major step towards that goal of $750,000. The town created an accrued leave reserve fund last year I believe it was, at fiscal or 2018's town meeting. We're recommending funding it with $750,000 of free cash. That would leave an unallocated balance currently of $1,332,000. There's an asterisk next to it, and it's unallocated at this point because we have 2 enterprise funds, that being Our Island Home and Solid Waste, which receive general fund taxpayer subsidies. And given the volatility of both of them, we typically have tried to reserve some free cash, because now that the tax rate is set, the only transfer we could make, if there was a need for it, would be at annual town meeting via transfer from free cash. So we are recommending holding some of that through the town meeting process to ensure that we do not have any issues with those two enterprise funds.
Okay, outstanding items and current unknowns are shown on this slide. Just a brief explanation about those. For at least the past 4 years, we've been putting forward the concept of a targeted override for large enterprise fund expenses that are covered in the general fund, specifically our island home. The select board has had quite a bit of discussion about this year and last year and in the preceding couple of years. We are again recommending an override to cover the island home subsidy and not use retained earnings from that fund. State aid is always a concern. Lately, it's been a bit higher than projected. We don't expect any adverse impacts with state aid other than what's already expected with the NRTA charge on our fiscal 21 cherry sheet. Harbor Place is an unknown at this point. That is a piece of property in the downtown area. It's previously known as Wilkes Square, and there may be some redevelopment that occurs there, and it may involve some town infrastructure improvements. So that is potentially out there. None of the citizen warrant articles that have been submitted for the 2020 annual town meeting have been included in our recommendations at this point. Some of them come with specific dollar amounts, some of them don't, but they would cost something if we adopted them. We have 53 citizen articles for the 2020 annual town meeting. Not all of them have a cost, some are, a good amount are zoning, but the ones that do have a cost we have not worked into our projection. The Contract Review Committee has recommended an additional $200,000 to its $450,000 Health and Human Services allocation for 2021. That is also not, at this point, worked into our budget projection. We are trying to figure out how we could potentially do that and then determine some other kind of funding source going forward after that. We do have 2 citizen warrant articles seeking funds for for their own Health and Human Services issues above and beyond the $200,000. Fee increases. We have examined the possibility of an across-the-board increase for town fees that might generate some additional funds, maybe between $50,000 and $100,000, maybe a little bit more. We have to be cautious about what fee increases are for because often they have to be tied to a documentable increase in town resources, although there's a little bit of flexibility with that. However, some fees are statutorily set and they're already at the statutory maximum. So it can't really be a totally across the board situation. Our future potential costs are listed here. There's a number of them. We've discussed a lot of these with the select board within the last year. The commuter shuttle is a new item. That is a little bit unknown right now. We're currently recommending that to start that off, we would allocate $100,000 from free cash for fiscal 20 and 21 service. And then there's just some other items listed there. Next steps are listed here. Again, we went to the board last week. We're here with you all tonight. The select board has a public hearing scheduled for January 8th on the general fund budget. This is an annual public hearing. Citizens can come and comment if they like. And right after that, the board will endorse a budget, whether it's what we have presented to them or maybe they'll modify it a little bit. And then it goes to the finance committee and they will spend the next couple of months reviewing it, meeting with departments, talking about other financial appropriations, and then obviously we end up at the annual town meeting on Saturday, April 4th. I think if we can get to the budget message, we just want you to see what the budget message is. You can read it at a later time if you wish. But we want to just show you where all the detail of our presentation is located. You might have to go through. Okay. So we try to have a go back to that title page. We try to have a sort of a theme for our budget, and Rachel Day, who has been working with us, she's our second assistant town manager, came up with this kind of phrase: a buoy is an anchored float that serves as a guide to show hazards or to keep something from sinking. And we thought that was sort of appropriate for the budget. So we move through the presentation. There's a table of contents. There's a very large appendix that has a lot of appendices in it. It's probably a different word for that. So if people want to see detail about our credit rating and all that stuff, it's in this appendix that's separately listed. Some of the you can keep going. Some of the items in the message itself are linked if you were looking at it online. So we have an introduction. Challenges, continuity, and caution are our theme taglines, I guess you would call them, for the fiscal 21 budget, and we review each of them with what our challenges are. The island home, we've mentioned that is a very significant challenge for us. We also have, and as is year-round service for NRTA is somewhat of a challenge as well. And then in that section is where we discuss an override recommendation for fiscal 2021. Continuity and financial strength. The town is in a very strong financial position, which is very good. We just don't have a lot of funds that are freed up right now to fund everything that we'd like to fund, or even most of what we'd like to fund in the general fund. We want to be cautious. There are some, keep going, there are some signs that the economy might be, you know, not stumbling exactly, but perhaps isn't going to be as great in the next few years. It's hard to tell. We don't really know. But we do keep track of a lot of various indicators, and some of them are starting to possibly tell us something. So we don't want to misread it or miss something entirely. Keep going. We have some charts and pie charts that show some detail about our expenses and our revenues. And there's lots of detail there. We have a section 3, Town Administration Expense Increase Recommendations, and we talk about the background here. We review our ranking system that I mentioned. We talk about the recommended items that we are putting forward for fiscal 21, which is not very much of what was submitted. Keep going. We have section 4, Current and Future Year Considerations. Some of that was really kind of in the PowerPoint, but sustainability is a huge issue for all towns, cities and towns across the country and probably in the world, and we're trying to figure that out here. Our strategic plan is always at the forefront of our discussions and our funding direction. Our staffing study. Health insurance is obviously an issue all the time, and we have to keep an eye on expenses there, and we've tried to work with collective bargaining units on mitigating the town's expenses as well as the employees, and that's pretty difficult. Coastal resiliency, infrastructure, and planning. Obviously, that kind of goes along with sustainability, but that is also something that we're having to really focus on. Collective bargaining, where all of us are in collective bargaining sessions now. You all have however many units you have. We have 5, and we've started negotiations with ours. Harbor Place, I mentioned. PFAS is a emerging issue. You all probably have heard a little bit about it on the news or read about it in the paper, and it is something that we are having to turn a lot of focus to very recently. And we've got a little kind of a group of town departments that are really starting to look at it. So that is probably going to be very costly, not just for our town, but for many, many towns. We have, in 2009, there was I think it was 2009, yep, an ad hoc fiscal committee that the select board appointed. They came up with a lot, and that was during the economic downturn. They came up with a lot of recommendations for new revenue possibilities. Some of them we have actually done. Some of them we maybe started but never finished for one reason or another. Some we didn't pursue at all for a variety of reasons. But I try to keep that in the budget reports every year so that we don't forget that we had a group that intensively looked at this. And so there's a bit of a report on that. Keep going. Back up what Jessica had. In this page at the end, we also talk a bit about if the economy does start to decline a bit, we're going to have to put in place some sort of measures to address it, and some of those are listed here. We would probably be looking at a reduction in force of personnel. We'd have to review all municipal services to really focus on what is municipal and what maybe isn't. We'd probably have to enforce some kind of a hiring freeze or chill. We wouldn't fill vacant positions or probably even fund them. And we'd have to eliminate other unexpended expense increases. We'd have to potentially reduce NRTA year-round service and probably defer capital or other projects. Hopefully we don't have to go to those levels, but you never know. And then we just have a conclusion about how we we've got a lot of competing demands on the revenue that comes in from the town, and they cannot all be met to the sufficiency of the requesters. So we're trying to spread it around as best we can. I think Brian mentioned that the school is, we feel like we've done our best with the school expenses, and it's significantly more than what is being allocated on the town side. I think that is it, and we're happy to take questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Libby and Brent. I'm going to ask the board goes back to the table so we can use our microphones, if that's okay. Steve, I'll start with you. Questions or comments?
You're probably better off starting elsewhere.
No.
I have a lot,
Well, I'll cut you off if necessary.
and I'll be back. I'm troubled by something that, where'd they go? You might not be aware of. We have had in the past an ad hoc town budget committee that said school committee members would be a part of it. We received, in fact, I think at our last meeting, a new, I'm gonna call it a strategic plan, it's district improvement plan, that listed as one of the elements of making sure we get the finance job done correctly, being members of a town ad hoc budget committee. And unfortunately for you, when I asked about it last week, Mike said I should ask you.
Oh,
So-
I'm happy to answer that.
Yep.
So we probably were ahead of that curve several years ago, before, or maybe right around when Mike even started. And there was a group formed, the Ad Hoc Budget Workgroup, it was called. It had the chair and vice chair of the school committee, finance committee, and select board, plus the finance director, town manager, and school superintendent. And at the time, that group was formed because there was a lack of communication between all of those groups. And over the next several years, I think the communication improved. We've been meeting less and less. We met maybe once last year, possibly twice. We haven't met at all this year. And that isn't really a function of, we don't want to meet with anybody. It's more been a function of there are so many emerging things that are going on in town administration, we just didn't make the time to do it. It's interesting that it's in your, whatever that item is that you
Improvement
talked
plan,
about.
yeah.
But that probably is something that we would go back to then for fiscal '22. We could perhaps even put a meeting like that together before town meeting, but we just didn't get it together.
So that might be something that would start even in the summer or September when
sure.
you get your first
Yep.
figures?
Yep, we could do that.
I thought it was a good idea, but it's in our plan. If we approve it, we won't be living up to it if there's no
Yeah,
work group.
we're happy to get it back into our schedule. It's just, I don't think I'm underestimating things when I say we have a lot going on.
Well, having tried to read everything I received this afternoon, I don't doubt that for a minute. We got a second document, and I did try to read them both. So I'm not sure where some of my questions or the answers are located. I'll have to count on you to know. The $1.7 million that you apparently discussed with the superintendent, does that cover the combination of operating overhead and salaries? I noticed those were two separate figures.
Yes, it's, that's actually, excuse me, made up of two components, really, and I believe it covers everything that the school superintendent and the CFO, when we sat down, said that they could operate with. But it's made up of $160,000 of free cash for the one-time $160,000 worth of technology upgrades, and then it's made up of $1,550,000 of money that would roll on an annual basis. So it's, as you know, under DESE guidelines, the school is able to allocate the particular money that's funded at town meeting into however they see fit. So that I believe it does, but I'm not the person to be able to accurately tell
But
you
the
that.
1.7 that you just reduced to whatever it reduced to covers both. I mean, the overhead operating expenses were 3 or 4 or 5 million?
Yes.
And the
that-
salaries were around 26?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's applied to both of those.
That is correct.
Okay. As a percentage of where we are in this fiscal year,
It's 5.1% increase.
5.1?
5.1% increase over last year.
What happened to the September projection of a 10% increase in revenues? Are you still projecting that?
We increased local estimated receipts by approximately 10%, and if you remember at the September projection, I think you actually came up after the meeting and talked to me about it and said that I'm very concerned that you're only projecting 2% increase for the school, and at this budget presentation, we've projected 5.1% increase for the school.
Okay, that's not my question. You still projecting approximately a 10% increase in revenues?
There was one line item, or one section of the increase in revenues, which was relative to local estimated receipts, which we increased by about $1.1 million, which equates to 10%. The overall increase in revenue is completely about 5%.
Okay. That clarifies something. I believe I read that the override that you're recommending for our island home, if it was passed, and I want to know what the procedure is,
Sure.
would free up a little over $5 million worth of money? 3.05?
It would free up $3.1 million. Right, it would free up, right now, in the budget as part of this presentation, there's $3.1 million held for transfer to our island home, so that we have that levy capacity in the event that the override didn't pass. We wouldn't be having to try and go back and find.
And then you
three-
also have to apply some retained earnings.
Right, but we wouldn't apply the retained earnings. The whole purpose of the override is twofold. It's to stop having to use the retained earnings from our island home, because that's an unstable funding source, and it is counter to our financial policies, which says that retained earnings should be used for one-time items. It also would solidify the funding source in the general fund so that we would automatically have that additional capacity to fund that, okay?
So that would be ongoing.
That would be permanent. It's a permanent override.
Hypothetically, if it's approved.
Yes.
That
Permanently.
would go year after year after year.
That's correct. Okay. So the process is this. Should the board agree with us, at the annual town meeting, we would have a vote in Article, I believe it's either 11 or 12, which is the enterprise fund budgets. The Ireland Home would have a line that says raise and appropriate $5 million. And that appropriation would be contingent on a successful ballot vote to allow us to override Proposition
So-
2.5.
Town meeting has to approve before it even goes to a vote.
Right, that's correct. Then
Okay.
it goes to a ballot vote. If they both are successful, it would give us the ability to potentially, and I want to be clear, when I've recommended this to the select board, it isn't to just go spend all the unused levy capacity that we would free up. It's that I'm focusing myself in my recommendations on how to fund Island Home correctly, so that we take the pressure off the general fund on a consistent every year basis.
Every year
okay?
basis, yeah.
Now, if individuals thought that we needed to spend that money, we would need to have a special town meeting to allocate that available levy capacity, and town meeting would have to vote to appropriate the additional funding via amendments to
Another
Article 8.
town meeting.
Yes, we would.
So this would not take place until sometime deep into the fiscal year.
I would, excuse me, I don't want to speak for town administration, but if the override were to fail, it would not take place deep into the fiscal year. It would be relatively soon after the start of, at a convenient
Right.
time. And I would believe that the same if we were going to appropriate additional spending, that we would do in roughly the same time that we would have done the override if it failed.
If it were approved at town meeting,
Mm-hmm.
the initial phase, would it be on the April ballot?
Yes.
So it wouldn't necessarily go well into the next fiscal year.
Well, it would depend.
Yeah,
Right, that's why I'm saying, yes.
I understand that.
right.
I'm
Yeah.
looking at the most optimistic
I understand that.
scenario. I'm sure you know, I think we need more. You've heard it from me before, you'll hear it again. And I've seen in, I think what you called unused levy, and the possibility of an override for our island home. If the override was successful, there'd be no need for the school to look for such a thing,
It would-
necessarily.
no, correct, I would agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, the one reason that we're holding back $353,000 is that last year, we had to do an amendment to the island home budget to reduce their revenues and increase the town subsidy from just over 2 million. And that is something that we need to have the flexibility to address in potential problems as they come up or potential issues that need to be addressed. And that's one of the ways that we have chosen to do it at this point.
So the general fund subsidy is almost $4 million.
3.1, yes.
Yeah.
And they're using.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes.
okay, 3
Yep,
million.
and they had retained earnings of 1,675,000, and we're pledging to use all of it,
And
so
when will we know whether the selectmen approve this?
the
The
override going.
request for an override.
That would be a town manager question, probably.
Well, the board will be discussing it again after the public hearing on January 8th, and they would presumably endorse it at that time. However, it will need a positive finance committee motion at town meeting.
Okay. The reason I ask that is, I think, and I couldn't find it in this document, that our timings don't coincide. We're not looking to approve a final school budget until February. I thought I read somewhere that the select board would be approving their overall town budget, which would include their allocation to us, sometime in January. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's usually how it works. That's not a new timing situation.
All right, so,
Hold on, Steve, I'm just gonna defer to Mike for a moment.
Yeah.
We would schedule, I think we have our budget hearing scheduled for January 14th, and the presentation to FinCom on January 16th. So we'll know in January what our budget is, which is in line with the town.
okay, I was looking at on the horizon rather than the budget timeline.
I should just want to clarify too. Whatever the select board endorses, it's not written in stone. There's a lot of tweaking that goes on between that time and the time the finance committee gets a hold of it and goes through the departments and by whatever they end up recommending to town meeting. It's going to change quite a bit.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve, are you all set with your questions?
I can hold off for a while, yeah.
Zona?
I just had one question on your presentation, one of the slides back. It listed school committee at 550,000, which was, I think, like an 11% increase. Can you expand on that just a tad for me?
I think that's the community school.
Did I
and-
say?
Yes.
did I say-
And last year,
I meant community
that,
school.
yep, so last year, the allocation was 500,000, and this year, when we were putting the presentation together, the school gave us asked that we change that from the 500 to the 550 as part of the overall allocation, so that's where the 11% comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Pauline?
No questions. Thank you.
Tim? I'm all set. Last chance, Steve, to ask a question.
No,
Okay.
we'll be getting back to it.
All right, thank you so much for your
Thank
presentation.
you all. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize my team who's here. You of course know Brian. Greg Tivnan is our Assistant Town Manager for Special Projects, and Greg's been integral in the budget process. And Alexandria Penta, who is our Budget Analyst, and she's been integral to the process as well. She cleans up all the loose ends for us. And our Chair, Don Hohogate, is here as well. So, and thank you all. We really appreciate
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Madam
for
Chairman,
coming
could I
tonight.
just thank them too?
Yes, you may.
Well, only because I actually read all this stuff this afternoon.
We appreciate it.
And I was awestruck at the amount of work that had to go in to putting all this together. So I may not agree with your conclusions everywhere, but I can't quibble about the amount of work you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
We appreciate that. And if you see any typos, let me know.
Thank you. Have a good night. Moving on to budget development, CPS, Julie Lamoli. Would you like to come sit next to Steve? Thank you.
Poor Julie.
Welcome, Julie.
good act to
Thank you
follow.
for being here.
Thank you. Hi, Judy. I forgot my regular glasses, so I have these little cheaters here. Thank you for having me to represent CPS. So, of course, I'm following in the fine footsteps of Kim, John, and Eve Marie with some pictures of our students and our staff, which is so important. On the right top, you have students in the 6th grade working on their geometry standards, decomposing and recomposing shapes. That's Dee Dee Avery's math class. At the bottom right, we have Mandy Bardsley's and the 8th grade team annual cardboard boat race. This year I think we had a nor'easter, so we had to have it at the community pool, which was wonderful in and of itself. And I thank so much Egan Maritime, Egan Marine Institute and so forth for helping with that day. I mean, all hands were on deck. Students took part in the engineered design process. 8th grade team, as I said, collaborated beautifully. The smiles, I know you can't really see them, even the ones who are sinking in the background, smiles were there. So it was really just such a great event. On the bottom left, we have our staff taking part in our SEL PD, our Social Emotional Learning PD, with Alice Cohen, who is a social emotional lead teacher in Cambridge Public Schools. This is an example of staff pulling a string to do a walk and talk as we are building relationships and, of course, working together to work with our students to build relationships. That was an amazing day. Alice was helping staff to incorporate SEL strategies into their teaching in order to support our students who have anxiety or are under stress or have experienced trauma. And one of the highlights of that day was knowing the why and talking to staff about it's important for students to know the why as much as they need to know the what. And they need to know reasons for doing things, and of course, within knowing the reasons, then they are more motivated. They are understanding the goal itself and how it applies to life in general. So I just wanted to show staff up there. It was a wonderful day. And then top left, you have our 7th grade designers as well, working on their physical science skate marble park design, and are related to kinetic energy and potential energy and kinetic energy. In this group, they were fixing the angle of that tube in order to release the marble and get it to drop into this hole in that top level. So again, just our students hard at work. So I wanted to just show those wonderful images. As school committee, I'm sure knows, CPS is 15% of the school committee budget, and 97% of that is on our payroll. And we have a couple of items we are requesting. And the first item is a world language teacher. Due to the untimely withdrawal of our world language teacher at the beginning of the school year, we lost a language teacher, and so we would love to be able to add a language teacher to our request. We have .6 added to a .4 technology already. We do not have a technology teacher right now. It's been reported that it was difficult finding a technology teacher for a .4 position, and the fact that we need to bolster our science and technology curriculum, and potentially can grab an expert at a 1.0, so we're asking for that additional .6. And we have a 1.0 special ed teaching assistant at CPS, as we are bringing forth a few students in IDSC programming, and we will be most likely losing a teaching assistant who will be heading up to the high school. That's it.
So, if
Sure.
I may
Right.
just add some, I hope, value. The world language position, and we had a conversation today, and in the past, it's been hard to maintain that Chinese teacher. And so I think in discussion today, the staff and administration would like to leave that open as a world language teacher, not Chinese or whatever. It may be that we look to add another Spanish teacher. There's a lot of discussion about Spanish for Spanish speakers, and so that might be a nice piece. So that's, just wanted to clarify that
Thank
that
you.
is open to discussion. And then the technology teacher, there was some discussion about what that might look like, and would that be digital literacy and digital responsibility, or might that be robotics and coding and some different pieces? So I think that depends on how, what kind of candidates we get, and how we structure a lot of the other pieces. There, if I may, there was some discussion too, Julie, about the need for vocational programming.
I just wrote
You
that,
wanna,
yeah.
you wanna speak to that?
No, I just wrote bolster Encore. Staff has talked to me since I came into the district of bolstering kind of all Encore choices, how we'll create those choices for students. The Voc Tech, staff has talked about in previous years, there was vocational studies in the middle school, and as time has gone on, for whatever reason, they've dwindled away, and potentially bolstering that back up again. So that was something we talked about, and I think here bolstering that those Encore pieces are important to us.
And that's also a part of class size, addressing class
Yes,
size.
yes.
And then the one request that was on here that did not go forward was the special education options teacher. I think in consultation with administration and hearing from faculty, that is, we have the number of people to provide that programming within our existing personnel. And so it's a matter of redeploying staff to meet the needs of a group of children that are challenging us as a school. You've heard me talk before about some of the mental health issues and in all of the schools, and we're certainly seeing it at CPS as well. And we need programming that meets the needs of all children. The members that have been on the board for a while, you know that when we've had Andrew Viselli present from the high school, we've often talked about a menu for kids with special needs and particular needs, emotional needs. So we need a menu of options for these children. No one program is going to address the needs of kids who are sometimes at the opposite ends of the spectrum. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much. Zona, any questions or comments? Pauline?
No, but I appreciate you bringing up the options piece of it, because I think that's what we hear a lot, is the need for an option for education,
Thank you.
so thank you.
Tim? Steve?
Yeah, at least I wasn't first, huh?
Sorry, you looked like you were deep in thought.
Yeah, well, I made some notes. How many of our students are currently taking Spanish, and do they get it every day?
Good question. So our sixth graders will have an expository class of Spanish, and so we'll do that semester. So they'll
Okay.
all will get an expository, and that's 2 times a week, a cycle. And then our 7th and 8th graders, it's definitely not all of them. I guess the number would be, I'm thinking, out of the 240 7th and 8th graders, probably 160, I would guess, are getting Spanish 3 times a cycle now.
3, so that.
Out of
are you
6
on a-
days.
I was gonna ask, so they're getting it half-time,
Correct.
roughly. You have I mean, I don't know where the options money would come from if it's not on this list. Or the voc ed. Well, there's money around, according to the town. And let me make a thank you, first of all. I absolutely agree with upping the tech position to full-time as an encore. We did that previously with the 6th graders, half the time, and also tried, I was back in social studies at the time, to get robotics and other advanced things for the upper grades. And the time would be available to do that. I think it's very important, and Mike acknowledged it was impossible to come up with a .4 person, so I'm very happy to see that come back into the budget. You're retaining the second music position that replaced Mandarin?
We hope so, and I don't know if anyone got to see the concert on last Thursday, but man, what a concert. And we're hoping to retain and keep that in the budget, as it is, again, we're talking about bolstering our encore. And we talked about 7th and 8th graders. You have 6th graders who we have taking chorus, 150, 148.
Yeah.
And then we talked about in middle school the fall off of wanting to get up and sing in front of your peers, but have that opportunity for other musical classes. So this is working out great. I think with the untimely withdrawal of a world language teacher, we actually stumbled upon a gem in another music class. So we're looking at being a little more creative next year with that music and so forth.
With the possibility, perhaps, of turning that at least partially into a band class?
If I may,
Please?
yes. I think that we have all discussed the need for a middle school band director for who is in the middle school as opposed to a shared staff member. It is challenging schedule-wise when a staff member is shared. I think there's no question between both middle and high school. I think and agree. I also think that if any of you saw our concert, the numbers are growing. We are seeing a larger number of students continuing with band in the middle school, and more than twice a week for one block would be very useful. I'm definitely a proponent of expanding the band program. I think there's a lot of value in increasing musical participation, especially with instruments. Earlier today, I even sent Mr. Sordovic some articles about connection between math and English scores and music performance. So something interesting to look into. But either way, I think that I think we are hoping that the current position can remain in the hopes that, yes, that will grow into a band director.
And would we have to search for a differently qualified person?
I think that's always a potential.
Currently we have a teacher who is in the process of his increasing his skills in order to be able to reach the needs of the students who teach who are instrumental students, but that he doesn't necessarily have the strength in the skills yet. It's a challenge for any musician to teach instruments that are not yours. The current teacher in question is a percussionist, and he does a marvelous job with percussion. He's also teaching guitar, and piano is a percussion instrument, so he's really helping and moving students forward with those instruments. And percussion instruments are many, but traditional band instruments, winds, brass, there is a need for instrumental technique classes in order to learn how to do that. Now, not a single band teacher that you meet knows how to play every single instrument perfectly. They will have a general understanding in order to help with technique, in order to help with improvement, and that is a standard part of the license. So the hope is that we can mentor this teacher to move forward and learn more instrumental technique, and he will feel comfortable, hopefully, in the future thinking of a band director position. So.
Thank you, Beth. Steve, any other questions?
I definitely support that, and I'm hearing support from the staff as well, to see if that could be increased. You made the mistake of mentioning math, and I have to touch on it. Although I will acknowledge there have been some small improvements, CPS is still our, there's no other way to say it, our weakest school in terms of MCAS results, and as I understand it, other testing results. And I'm wondering why I'm not seeing a math teacher here. Or some kind of a math specialist, an interventionist. NIS has, this is a funny way to say it, but they have 1.5. A combination of a math interventionist and a math coach. And we do not. And I am going to request today that you and the administration look again long and hard about finding a way to get more math staff into this budget. I'll make some real, no, I don't, I'm not gonna.
All right, thank you.
mention
Let's
other
let Julie
possibilities.
respond to your
Yeah.
request.
So, yeah,
please.
this is part of our scheduling committee talk, definitely, and I don't feel, I think it's up there with the options teacher. We have some staff that we can use to potentially create some smaller math intervention programming. I think that 6th grade having the double math is definitely imperative, and we hope to move forward with that. And I absolutely hear what you're saying, scheduling team, we talked about it last week, about kind of tossing up what we have here and what can happen. Staff is verbalizing the fact that these filling our encore times of day with potential math and literacy interest courses, possibly staffed by teachers, all within the contractual time, of course, but these are things we are talking about. So the conversation's there, and with scheduling and the building of the schedule, that will come. And I'm hoping to inform some greater intervention here.
Thank you, Julie. Steve, are you all set with your questions and comments? for now?
I am.
Okay. I just have one quick question. Would you consider hiring a world language teacher in a language that is not offered in high school?
It's funny, the conversations we have had are about high school, so building the foundation for the
Right.
high school languages. And then, again, we had a meeting with scheduling, and people talked about our island languages that are spoken, and potentially providing that learning for the languages that are spoken on the island. So, of course, Portuguese came up, and we talked about other Russian. So it's in the conversation. We're thinking about it. Our staff talked about the strong world language in high school and how we want to work with the high school and keep the foundations that are there.
Right.
It's hard. We're in a hard
Yeah.
spot.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time and your
Thank
presentation.
you, Julie.
Special Services, Michelle Brady Bobert.
Bring the chairs from the conference room in future.
Hi, Michelle. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your support for special education. I don't have lovely pictures of kids because I don't want to identify what students have disabilities, but we have our typical smiley face holding the sun. The special ed budget is 21% of the whole school district budget. As you can see, most of it is payroll, similar to the other, the schools. The services is a fair amount. That also includes the residential tuitions, some consultants, and then supplies and travel, technology, and other. In terms of actual requests and increases, most of these are already embedded within the other schools' budget. So last week you heard about the preschool teacher at Nantucket Elementary School, and also a preschool teaching assistant to go along with that teacher. Just heard of the teaching assistant for the IDSC program at the middle school. And last week, you also heard of a request for a special ed teacher at the high school to help with the life skills and the vocational programming there. The request that I have for a special ed department that was not included in other schools' budgets includes a team chair position. We currently have an assistant director of special ed who concentrates in the middle school and high school, and I would like to add a position that would be similar in scope as on a teacher scale, to serve as a team chair to work with preschool through grade 5 in running team meetings, helping problem solve, helping with the IEPs, and providing support to staff and parents. So that is my main request. Is that it? You don't go over the supplies and
Social
things, right?
worker at NIS
Oh.
was the only other thing that didn't get, right?
Yeah, that didn't get on there,
Yeah.
I don't think. So,
I thought that was in the
That was in the-
NIS
Yes, that
budget.
is.
Yeah.
right, but I
She
do,
had mentioned
right, I
other
do,
schools' budgets.
right, so I
Okay.
put it, I did put it on my rationale, which I don't think you
Yeah,
guys saw
but
that.
it's in her budget
It's not on
already.
that, yes, it's already in that budget, and
Okay.
again, as Superintendent Cozart said, we have a fair amount of students with increasing behavioral challenges and mental health needs, and a half-time social worker will ensure that all students have access to the social worker, while making sure that the students in our behavior program have basically a full-time social worker available to them to help run the programs. So I don't know if you have any
All right, thank
questions.
you. Any
It's simple this year.
questions,
It's
Zona,
short and
comments? Pauline?
Thank you,
Kim?
Michelle.
Steve?
Of course.
sweet. Oh, good.
Well, I think they're easy ones.
Okay.
Is the teaching assistant that you have listed for CPS
Mhm.
in addition to what the teaching assistant that was listed by CPS?
No, it's the same.
Well, then it's in both budgets.
It's not in the budget, she just listed it so that people could see
Right.
that there were things in the school budget.
So like, I don't know if you saw this sheet, but I have, this is the one position,
I
and then
did, and
embedded
I'm gonna get to
within,
that.
but embedded within others is the TA.
But when you added these numbers up, you got the 286,000.
I'm gonna defer to Martin for a moment.
Through the chair, yes, these, that includes numbers and positions that were presented already as part of separate building budgets. So, as Michelle pointed out, her budget, under her control is part of the central budget.
Yeah.
So this is Org 138. I just wanted to make another point. The social worker is not here because it wouldn't be part of the support and it wouldn't tie in. What I mean by that is the following. It's part of a guidance department, so that's not under SPAD. But the position obviously works with the special services department, but it's not, it won't tie in if I presented it here as a key to change part with the support that you have as part of the packet, which are the back pages with all the orgs and objects, individual ones.
So in other words, Michelle's not asking for all this money, and that's a good thing.
Well, we collaborate, we all work together, so we
No, if
agreed.
it's in both places.
Yes.
Thank
it
you,
is.
Martin.
Yes.
It's not double counted, that's what I mean. It's separate. She supports the positions
Yeah.
of
How does the team chair business work? I have heard of it before. This is not a new concept to me, but this seems to be saying contradictory things. The team chair would be conducting evaluation meetings pre-K to 5, but also supporting the other schools?
No, so right now I have an assistant director of special
Yeah.
education. She fills that role. She does 5th grade through 12th grade.
Ah.
But this way would be, she would continue to do that in 6th grade through 12th, and then a new person. And one of the benefits of
Okay.
doing it is that you have one person making those eligibility decisions. We're more consistent and aligned when we're doing our evaluation meetings.
Yeah, that's
to
just a
determine.
different interpretation of the wording, but I
Okay,
understand.
sure. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle.
Okay.
Kelly Cooney, our Director of English Language Learners. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, how are you?
Great, how are you?
I am good.
Good. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I don't have to play a game or anything, which is good. That's always a little bit more stressful. Trivia game with the kids. This is easier. So are we ready?
We are.
Okay, so our pictures highlight Jocelyn and Melanie are up there in the front, and they are both Nantucket Public Schools graduates, so I think it's really important to highlight them. They're a huge asset to the school system, to our program, and for our students. I try to hopefully get as much time as they can working face-to-face with students, but it's really pretty minimum. But when they do, it's a huge benefit because we learn a lot about our students and their needs when they get some face time with these two. And the rest is just students and work. So, there we go. Who is in charge of the slideshow? Oh, okay, thanks, Martin. I don't know who to look at. Thank you. So the L budget is 4% of the school committee budget. And the payroll is 97% of the L budget. And like special ed, the L budget payroll, personnel-wise, is really actually part of the school budget. So it's not a separate budget. It's embedded within the schools as well. But if we look at it as a department, as a total, then it's 90% of the total L budget. But it's not two separate pots of money. It's the same pot of money that goes into the schools. Similarly, this year, Kim and I collaborated to advocate for a new ESL teacher at NES. So we're really hopeful for that. The needs are huge. The numbers are over 100 at NES, and they're just growing. We know from our pre-K and Head Start numbers that there are more multilingual learners coming up. So that's where the bulk of the request is. And then for the department,
We requested an increase in professional services, that's the budget line, so L does have its own like little separate budget for things like, professional services, which includes translations. So when we have to send something outside, Eileen does all of our special ed, translations in-house for Spanish, and then the three of, of the team members, Jocelyn, Melanie, and Eileen, will do translations for teachers, principals, notices home, but when we have translations in other languages, we send them to an outside agency. So recently, we sent out for report card comments, for example, in Russian, Bulgarian. We had a Bulgarian. So we asked for an increase in that budget line because luckily, teachers are requesting more and more. So that's good. And then a small increase also in the professional development budget line. Over the past couple of years, a lot of the professional development in the department that serves both ESL and SEI, which means all the content teachers, was free, either because LaSalle University gave us a few scholarships for teachers, and Boston University also came and offered a class for free last year. So we know we have needs going forward for professional development. And while those PDs are great for content teachers and ESL teachers also have their own license in the ESL subject matter. And so I also asked to increase that budget line so that we can definitely differentiate for ESL teachers to be able to get the PD in their subject area. And that often means it has to be something that's online and more specialized. So some of the PD works for all people who serve ESLs, but some of it's really specialized. And that's it.
Great, thank you so much, Kelly. Questions and comments? Pauline?
No, thank you.
Tim?
I have a couple, but they may
Steve?
actually be for Martin.
Okay.
Why don't or should the increased requests, why don't they appear on her list? Are they somewhere else in the budget, or are they not approved yet? Please explain.
Which request?
So-
Well, she's in her narrative.
I think I
Sure.
got part of my request.
She,
So in the
you're talking
narrative-
about the SEI teachers that she had requested and that we did not recommend go forward?
I don't know what SEI, I don't see SEI teachers listed here. It's talking about a couple of increased allotments for professional services.
So professional development for
So-
inter-
A
Yeah, so
request to
professional
increase the
development
line to
instead of-
14,500.
So instead of $5,000 in professional
Right.
development that I originally requested, we redetermined that, like, for example, the SEI class, we're going to go potentially a different route, and that instead I would ask for $3,000. And that's what we
Oh, so
decided
the
upon.
14,500 is no longer a
I wasn't-
valid figure?
I wasn't ever asking for 14.5, I was
Okay.
just asking for that line to increase to that. So I was asking for I think I was asking for an $8,000 increase for professional services, and originally, but then after, because we all collaborate and all of us asked for money in the same lines, we had to divvy up the pot amongst all of us.
So it's come down to what's on the key to
Yes.
proposed changes line.
Exactly.
So the original requests are all included for your information so that you are aware of. what
I've
was
gotcha.
requested. And then what was approved after discussions is on the key to change.
Okay.
So kind of more importantly than that is I also requested 2 SEI coaches originally.
Yep.
And I had advocated for that to be able to be kind of brought to the forefront. We know we have competing needs, so it's not the highest priority when we look at everything else we need as a district. But I think to help all teachers, a few SEI coaches could be really instrumental because we have more and more English language learners, and while our core content teachers are learning to unpack their standards and the practices of their area of instruction, overlaying on how to look at the language demands and the SEI needs is a whole other piece. So I do believe that eventually coaches would really be able to help our teachers move forward.
And the NES full-time EL teacher is in your budget but not Kim's?
We both made the request.
Same request, but it shows up in the EL.
But it shows up here, not in Kim's as well.
It's in Kim's budget. But when, okay, so just to go over the presentation of, these are departments that touch upon each individual school.
Okay.
So when we have to present them, we sort of read through the presentation, so we present them as a whole. But they are part of this budget. Nothing is double counted, it's just presented again, both by Michelle and Kerry, and you see it also elsewhere in the individual budgets.
But it's just the one teacher.
It's just one teacher.
So,
Okay.
and it is part of the NES budget, but it is also supported by the EL director.
I'd just like to make a comment, and maybe a footnote would be in order on both of them to say, you know, it's gonna also show up in your whatever, because this question's gonna come up again if we have a new school committee member that doesn't know that for the first time, I think.
Or it doesn't
Martin,
remember
I'm
it
gonna have
last
Martin,
year.
I'm gonna have Martin speak to this for a moment.
On each of the support in your packets, if you turn around at the back where all the numbers are, at the very top, after the 2019, 20, and 21, it would say account is a component of NES budget, account is a component of NIS budget, on both EL and special services. That would be page.
Please don't make us look at
6
that.
in mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is over the back, and that would
Yeah, it's in
point that these accounts are components of the individual school budget.
Okay. It's just, again, just a recommendation, it gets lost in all that numbers page, it just would be great if you put it on the summary page, just a thought. And then that question won't keep coming up, because it keeps coming up.
Well,
I
this,
remember this kind of sort of before.
if I may, we didn't separate out ELL in the past, and we were asked to put ELL in one place where you could see it. So this is
Right.
our attempt, and I think that's a good thing. I think that ELL and special education, you should be able to see it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it goes in their line item if it's specific to a school. That's,
And I get that.
Okay.
Superintendent, it's just that it does look double counted, if you're just looking at it from, a layman's term, I should say.
Okay.
That's just,
Yep.
just a recommendation.
But what has,
On the,
go ahead.
through the chair, I apologize. On the key changes at the top, it would say add a teacher or whatever the position is at the school. So do you want me to, do you want me to add an account there?
It
when
is
goes?
really with the school, is it not? It's really under NES, when it's NES, it's really under CPS, when it's CPS. And I think that's where it should show. However, if you wanna, I think your idea is to show it that it's part of the ELL department.
Yes.
It's part of the special service department. It's just that it looks, cause we're looking at these, you guys did it in such a way so that we only need to look at that one summary page and get a quick number. So we
Right.
can add up and see what our budget is. And when you list it in both places, if I take all these and put them together, every time I flip through, I'm gonna add. I'm not thinking, let me look at the top of the page and see if it's already been counted. That's
Right.
all.
So when I put together the report for the budget hearing and the PowerPoint, I do put it in one place.
Right.
So that you can add that up and
Right.
see what the additions are to the district. But
So for
Okay.
example, if I may, on this one, this would appear in the NES budget.
Yes.
this one,
Yeah,
yes, in the
Okay.
NES budget, right.
Thank you.
Reporting wise, Steve, through the chair,
Yeah.
just to respond, reporting wise, we have to report by school building. But also, when we present, we obviously break out special education and EL. So if you look at, for instance, the charts, especially for SPED is 21% of the budget. That means that we take each special division within each building and we combine them, present SPEDs separately.
So
If you look
they're
at the other
here.
charts, where SPED is not separated, you won't see them there, it's
Right.
just presented by a
Okay.
school.
Right.
This is the way to present these departments, and I know it can be, misleading. Well, it's not misleading, I don't necessarily call it that, I think it can be confusing at times, but it's not double counting, it's just
I was not assuming it was double. I just wanted the clarification.
But no, I'm open to any changes.
Perfect.
I want to include it in the sheet changes as an explanation on the bottom.
Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you,
Thank
Kelly.
you,
No, thank you.
Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
Athletics, Chris Morey.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
we run out
Welcome.
of money, Mr. Maury, so that's the problem with being last in line.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Hi,
Good. How are
great.
you,
How are
Chris?
you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm sure you have a pile of questions.
By the time you're done.
To start off with, we got a cover sheet that has some great pictures of it, of some of our athletic teams and some of the, our more successful athletic teams. On the far left-hand corner, you've got the varsity golf team from this fall, which went undefeated this season and won the Cape and Islands League Championship, finished third in the South Sectionals. The center picture is our boys swim team from last winter, who won the South Sectionals and then finished second at the state level. Far right is our field hockey team from this fall, and that is actually a picture of homecoming and their homecoming float. On the bottom left is the seniors from the varsity football team. The scoreboard behind them is the scoreboard at Martha's Vineyard. You'll notice the lights are turned off. The Vineyard did that because they didn't want anybody to see the score on there.
In the picture?
Right. And then last on the far right is our softball team from last spring, which finished the season at 18-2. And my softball coach insisted that I put that in there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As you look at the pie sheet, you'll see that athletics represents 2% of the overall school budget. For the athletic budget, 66% of the budget goes to salaries, which is either administrative or coaching salaries, and then 24% goes to our transportation costs. You will not see a sheet of any increases or decreases for our budget. We have got a roll forward budget. You will notice in one line item there is an increase in the salary line item, but that is actually a roll forward of some positions that were put in place for programs that we've added in the last year. Keep in mind when you're looking at our budget that we do have the advantage of having our participation fee system and a revolver account. So our participation fee system provides about an extra $100,000 in funding for the athletic programs that helps to supplement our overall budget.
Thank you very much.
So you're asking for nothing?
Asking for nothing.
Awesome.
Did you hear that, Steve?
No, I went right down
It's
the
not your
list and
turn, Steve.
I knew
Pauline.
exactly what you were doing.
You know, Chris, thank you. That's amazing to be reminded $100,000. I remember
Yeah.
before we had the paper for
Yeah.
program, so that's really substantial. Remind us again, if you would, please, of the scholarship opportunity for students who have a hardship on their feet.
Correct. With our user fee system, we've always promoted this. We never turn any kid away from participation in athletics for financial reasons. So we have a waiver system where anybody that has financial hardships of any kind, there's a very simple form that they fill out. And what we try to do is we try to go out and get some scholarship money to cover that if we can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Tim?
What was the score of the Vineyard again?
42-20 for the good guys.
Any questions?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it?
Steve, you're all set? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
No.
I know. Thank you, Chris.
No, let's get
Thank
to
you.
new sports. What else is there?
What else is there? Oh, my goodness. Moving on to committee discussions and votes to be taken. May I have a vote to approve the donation from Nantucket Community Park and Recreation to the Nantucket Community School Jetties Tennis in the amount of $1,594.63?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve the December 3rd, 2019 meeting minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a vote to approve transfers and invoices?
Move approval.
Yep. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Superintendent's report, the annual report?
Yes, a copy of the annual report went out to you today. You may not have had an opportunity to read through that. I apologize that it just arrived on your computer today. As you may remember, that is a report of the last school year, July 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2019. So you will have reports from each of the principals and department heads across the district. And I would encourage you to read it, and if you have any suggestions or edits, I'd be happy to take them before I send this to Erica Mooney at the town of Nantucket, as this will go into the report for the annual town meeting.
Oh,
What's the deadline for that, Mike?
I think it was several weeks ago.
Okay.
so you'd like
Actually,
a-
Erica gives it to us in August in hopes that she will get it in January.
I remember that.
I'm not sure that I'm correct in that thinking, but that's the way that I
Yeah.
see it. She never bugs me too much until January.
So if I may, you won't, if we send you some comments or thoughts, you won't need to bring this back to us?
No, this
Okay.
isn't for your approval, this is.
Good.
Hi, may I
Yes.
add? You left off Principal Kimberly Kubish. Everybody else is principal, she does not.
I will fix that, thank you.
And I underestimated when I said a 4-page report.
I did fix that in my submission to you.
Well,
Well,
see, this is
All
why
right.
we do this.
That's right.
I will try to fix that.
All right, moving on to subcommittee work group. Any reports? No? Zona, you went to Cape Cod Collaborative last week when I spoke to you?
Very interesting meeting, a lot of conversation about the buses that we're getting brand new that have a lot of issues, both on and off island, and the costs associated with that, which I found very interesting, to say the least. They are in the process of finding a new location for their Waypoint School, which I'm learning more and more about the collaborative every day. It's quite interesting, it's quite intriguing. And did I mention they serve dinner? Thought I would say that. But anyway, I'm happy to be a part, a very welcoming group, and they do a lot of wonderful things. They're really involved in everything, so thank you for that.
It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for
Yes.
attending those meetings, because it's not easy to get
It's
to.
not easy, monthly.
may I
Second
ask,
Wednesday of each month.
what kind of issues you're talking about? Safety related or?
Well, you know, it's new, yeah, they're safe, there are pieces, parts that have to be replaced on brand new buses, and they pay a lot of money. They pay over $100,000 for buses,
Oh, they're
which
very
I
expensive.
didn't know, you know, the cost of buses. But these are new buses that they've gotten in the district recently, and he was talking about the cost just to get a bus fixed on Nantucket. They have
Oh
to
my
send somebody over, they
goodness.
have to pay for the labor, or if they bring the
Mhm.
bus back, it's, you know, $1,000 to go back and forth. It's expensive. So that's one of their big, you know, items on their list, is to resolve. So they're negotiating with the bus companies
I
right
was
now.
gonna say, there better be warranty
And the problem
considerations here.
is, they're limited to who they can use for buses, who they can
Yeah.
buy buses from, which, you know, is a whole nother ballgame.
Right.
It's pretty interesting.
Tim?
No,
Oh,
I
all right.
think that's interesting in the context of the NERDA buses. Perhaps getting more of the kids going on the NERDA buses.
You know, something I keep thinking about dealing with this rotary, not to change the subject too much, is that would it help traffic at all if we, I know there are kids that live close to the school that don't need buses, but if you put one more bus on the route, on that Bartlett Road route, wouldn't that help some of the traffic? I mean, I have to think that would help some of the traffic, people trying to get to work in that long line that backs all the way up past Essex sometimes. That every morning when I go to work, because I live off the Bartlett Road, I go around to Somerset Lane, and I avoid all that traffic, and I can get to work in 5 minutes. You know, I'm not speeding, but it's just impossible if you don't leave your house before 7:15, 7:30. You're out of luck. So,
Not
just a
that
thought.
I think it's an island-wide problem, though. I mean,
I was
Old
gonna
South
say-
Road is backed up.
Not that I want to delay getting to my cheeseburger, but Old South,
Right.
a couple of times, That's right, you're down there too.
Mhm.
The buses are going in both directions, stopping traffic, every 100 yards. I'm not saying they shouldn't be stopping, but there are wrong times of day to be out there.
So now I'm just going to mention our student council representative Joel is not here, but I do want to congratulate him publicly for being accepted into Tufts because it's pretty
Oh,
impressive.
good. Actually,
And if
I
you're
knew that.
watching, Joel, congratulations. Our agenda for the next meeting.
I think the school improvement plans are the thing that we really want to spend the most time on. I'm not sure that we will actually meet with the Veritas staff on the 7th. That may be pushed off. I would like to hear from John to make sure that it's an appropriate time. So I would expect that we will move that piece. Would like to also bring your attention again to the fact that the budget hearing is set for the 14th. So that's the middle Tuesday of the first and third school committees. Okay?
6 p.m. for
6 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Can I just ask, do we have a date? I think you said the date for the finance committee presentation?
Yes, that's on the 16th that was
January.
of January at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. All right. Any other comments before we adjourn? May I have a vote to adjourn?
Motion to
Thank you.
adjourn.
Second?
Merry Christmas, everyone.
All in
Merry
favor?
Christmas, yes, and
Aye.
Happy New Year.
Happy all of the above.